Alrighty, guys, welcome back to Engineering Major Philosophy Minor. And if you just watched my review of Run, Hide, Fight, since it's on my mind, I am going to go ahead and do a review of Wonder Woman 1984. Now, spoiler alert, there are going to be spoilers in this video. So just if you don't want the movie to be spoiled in any kind of way, then go ahead and just stop watching this video now. So, spoiler alert. Just want to reiterate that I am going to be spoiling it. Okay. So let's go ahead and just talk about an overall rating that I would give Wonder Woman 1984. I would give Wonder Woman 1984 a 4 out of 10, maybe a 5 out of 10. And I'm going to explain why here. So in a similar way to Run, Hide, Fight, which I just did in the previous video, if you watched that, I'll go ahead and break it down with the same categories, but I might add a couple categories for Wonder Woman 1984 to justify why it gets such a low rating, in my opinion. So let's go ahead and start off first with, let's see, what did I start off first before? I think I started off with just general acting. So I do think that Gal Gadot is a good actress, but for some reason and this could have had to do with just the way that the script was written and the plot and theme of the movie, which we'll get to in a minute. But in my opinion, her acting just like was not that awesome in Wonder Woman 1984. It did feel like a lot of the lines were like the way that she delivered the lines was a little bit contrived. It just didn't seem like there was the full emotion behind the delivery as she had presented in the first Wonder Woman movie, which I actually thought was pretty good. Now, the acting of the villain in Wonder Woman 1984, I actually thought was relatively well done. At least, the actor did a good job of delivering the actual lines that he was supposed to deliver and kind of emoting or evoking the kind of emotions that one would expect when delivering these lines, with exception to when he's talking to his son. I felt like a lot of the scenes where the villain was talking to his son were, again, they just felt like very contrived, and it didn't feel like it didn't feel very sincere. But other than that, it was an okay job. But the problem with the villain is the villain just was not a particularly interesting character in my opinion. And a lot of that also has to do with kind of the plot and the theme. Now, there is kind of a sub-villain, Kristen Wiig. Her acting was just kind of, it just seemed very typecast, very typical of the roles that Kristen Wiig generally plays, except, of course, this is an action movie, not really like a rom-com or just like a plain comedy kind of thing. And obviously, they're trying to kind of mix in the comedy with the action, which is, what Marvel has tended to do very well with movies like Thor Ragnarok and also just Avengers 1 and 2. Well, 1, 2, and 3, actually. Is that right? Yep. Well, 4. There are 4 Avengers movies, actually, now that I think about it. Anyway, they do like a pretty good job. Um, Marvel does a pretty good job with the comedy, but I find that the DC movies have not really done such a great job with it. I think the only DC movie so far that has come out. Well, I guess I did like Aquaman. Aquaman, Man of Steel, and the first Wonder Woman, I think, are relatively good movies. But anyway, I'm kind of going off on a tangent right now. Kristen Wiig's character just wasn't interesting. I don't know. And then so let's get off of acting for a second because I think you guys can tell that I wasn't really a big fan of the acting. Let's go ahead and go on into like plot and theme and stuff like that. So in terms of plot and theme, I would say the biggest issue that I had with Wonder Woman 1984 was just like these very ridiculous like non-realistic things that were happening in the movie. So if you watch the Run Hide Fight review, you'd know that in that video I talked about a scene where Wonder Woman is reunited with whatever his name is, like her love from World War I, in some bizarre way, and and then they need to basically fly from the United States in. Are they in Washington D.C.? Yeah, I think they're in D.C. and they need to fly to like Egypt or something like that. Is it Egypt or is it somewhere in the Middle East? Well, regardless, it's somewhere on the Eastern Hemisphere. Um, and they need a jet, and they're actually at um, the Smithsonian Aerospace Museum. So, as an aerospace engineer, I've been to the Smithsonian. I've also been to the Udvar Hazy Space Center in Dulles, which is absolutely legit. They've got a space shuttle there. So it was cool to see, the Solar Dynamics Observatory and stuff like that, and then, areas where I actually visited. But then what they do is they go outside in the back and they just like hop into like a random display, like jet that's on display, and for some reason it's fully fueled, fully functioning, has engines in it, and the Wonder Woman's like lover boy or whatever, like he's only flown planes in World War I, and they're commandeering what was, I think, like maybe a 1980s or maybe 1970s. I can't remember exactly what plane it was and when it was made, but let's just say 70s or 80s for sake of example, like a modern like warfighter jet, which has significantly different like controls layouts, has like many more functions, has flaps and slats, has different control surfaces, obviously has completely different engine characteristics. We're talking about a propeller, probably a piston propeller in World War I versus a turbojet, and just completely different set of flight characteristics, flight envelopes, altitudes, and stuff like that. For some reason, he can just like randomly fly this plane, right? But that's not even the worst part. The worst part about it is when they have planes on display in museums, they don't have fully functioning engines in them. And even if they did have fully functioning engines in them, they don't have the plane fueled, sitting on the tarmac, like just sitting on display on like a grass area or something like that, right? So just like this part of the movie like really bothered me. And then they get into the plane, right? And so I get that the movie's fiction, but if you're gonna mix it in with reality, like, in some way, like there needs to be like some explanations first for these things, at least in my opinion. But they get in the plane, they take off. Wonder Woman makes it invisible, which in the comics, I'm not sure if. Well, first off, in the comics, I believe that it's like the Justice League. It's probably Batman that actually makes Wonder Woman's jet. Anyway, she makes the jet invisible, but then they do something which, to anyone who works in the aerospace industry, is a big, big no-no with planes, which is that you do not fly into debris clouds with planes, like with any kind of plane, because stuff gets sucked into the engine, especially a turbojet. You might be able to get away with it with a piston prop for like a little bit, but you do not want to fly into debris clouds. So what do they do in Wonder Woman? They end up like flying through fireworks, which is like, not only do you not want to fly through a debris cloud, but you also don't want to fly through an exploding debris cloud. So that is just absolutely silly. So they're flying around through the fireworks, and then they fly all the way from Washington to like the Eastern Hemisphere. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the plane that they got into does not have the range to make it over to where they like eventually flew to. So that in and of itself, just like those like irritating technical points, just like really like messed up the movie for me. And then so now let me get into like more of some of the actual plot. So personally, I got super confused throughout the movie as to what the main villain's actual motivation was, because it just it just seemed like he accomplished one motive, but then all of a sudden he just kept doing more and more and more and more stuff, and it's like, okay, I guess you're trying to make the case that evil people just keep doing evil stuff, and that's totally fine, but it just seemed like there was no more motive behind it, and I just got super confused as to why he needed to do certain things. If you look at most villains in movies or in plays, or whatever, they generally have very specific motives, and they've really thought through how they're going to accomplish that motive. And either and basically what happens is either that plan gets thwarted in some way, or that plan succeeds, but then the good guys take out the villain, then have to reverse it or whatever. But it's usually very, very well thought through. And I just felt like this villain story was not well thought through at all. And then combine that with just the poor acting, and it was just kind of a meh. It was just a meh movie. So now let's go ahead and talk about cultural messaging and stuff like that. And I don't want this to get too political at all. It's definitely a very girl power movie, and that's totally fine. Now, one of the things that let's take the Avengers as an example. So you have Scarlett Johansson playing Black Widow, right? Now in the comics, Black Widow doesn't actually have any superpowers. Um, and in the Marvel universe generally, even in the Avenger movie, she doesn't have any superpowers, and yet she's competing in terms of fighting style and fighting prowess, on the same level as Captain America, with super strong space villains and stuff like that. But she's just a normal human person, and she's doing things that not even a normal human man could do. And so arguably that's a little bit more annoying, than Wonder Woman. Obviously Wonder Woman herself, is a god. So it makes a little bit more sense. But anyway, it's obviously a girl power movie. But the kind of cultural thing that I thought was big thematic in the movie was this idea of just telling the truth and not cheating your way to an end goal, which is a fully good thing to advocate for, completely. Except that you know the movie culminates with basically everyone telling the truth, so to speak, and renouncing something that they wished for, that they apparently you know they basically cheated the world with magic, in order to obtain this thing. And all they simply have to do is just say that they renounce something, and all the evil effects of it go away. Now there's absolutely everything important about telling the truth and being honest with yourself, being honest with other people, doing the best you can to not lie, and and just being forthright about the things that you believe, and striving to achieve lofty and good intentioned goals and things like that. That's totally fine. But in the real world, you have to act that out. You can't just say, "Oh, I believe in this one thing," and then it just happens, right? You have to believe something resolutely. First, you have to convey your ideas to other people. And in your actual actions toward the world, your actions need to reflect what you actually believe. And it was just kind of annoying to see oh, all you have to simply do is just say that you want to tell the truth, and then everything bad that has happened as a result of you lying just magically goes away. No, that's not how it works. If you lie and you mess something up, then you need to atone for it in some way. And I'm not talking about a struggle session, or a Soviet tribunal or anything like that. I'm just saying that you need to look back on your own life, and think about why you were dishonest, and that you're not going to be dishonest like that in the future, and you need to catch yourself doing that. And sometimes you need to make amends with other people, directly or indirectly, or you need to make amends with yourself by doing a series of actions, that kind of boost your own self-confidence and stuff like this. So there's a lot of like things you actually have to do in real life in order to like in order to really end up living out the cultural message that Wonder Woman 1984 wanted to portray. But in the movie Wonder Woman 1984, there's none of that having to like act out difficult things in order to atone for the bad things that um, have happened to you. So that to me just made the cultural message kind of fall flat. And then the last comparison that I want to make has to do with how Wonder Woman ends up having to deal with Kristen Wiig's character. Um, so I'm going to say something, and it's not because, it's not because I wanted things to be more violent or anything like that, but it's because I think it would have made a much more interesting point in terms of character development, like by Wonder Woman. So she ends up like electrocuting Kristen Wiig's character, but not killing Kristen Wiig's character. Even though Kristen Wiig has like gone off completely on this like total power trip, just like awful, hurting people and doing bad things, and not tapping out essentially when she's lost a fight. Wonder Woman doesn't end up having to kill her. And I drew this comparison when I was like talking to other people who I watched the movie with. I drew the comparison to the movie Man of Steel. So if you haven't seen Man of Steel, what basically happens is this is a movie about Superman. Superman, long story short, ends up getting reunited with like the last people from Krypton, which is the planet that he's from. And the main villain at the end of the movie ends up being like the very last Kryptonian, like pure blood Kryptonian. Obviously, Superman is full Kryptonian, but obviously there's not another female Kryptonian, and so if he kills this last guy, it's basically the end of like the pure Kryptonian species, what have you. But obviously, this guy just keeps like doing evil, and he wants to just like kill all the human beings. And so Superman has to make like an insanely difficult decision. So he basically needs to choose between the human race and the Kryptonian race. And he basically decides that that he just kills, the main villain. And to me, this was like a super powerful moment because Superman isn't, not only is he going against his own will to not end life, but he's also basically dooming himself to be the last Kryptonian, and there will never be like another like pure-blooded Kryptonian after that. He has to make that tough decision towards the path of righteousness. He has to like commit an action that is difficult, mentally arduous, and arguably like maybe immoral, in order for him to like save lives. So I just thought it would have been a lot more powerful in Wonder Woman 1984 if she had to make a very, very difficult decision as to whether or not, like, basically her only options are like end life in order to save the planet, or spare life, and the planet ends basically. But of course, what happens is in Wonder Woman 1984, Wonder Woman gets the best of all worlds, and the villain actually ends up getting the best of all worlds too, which is like a very bizarre plot hole. Another plot hole that happens. So, so anyway, guys, those are some of the reasons why I thought Wonder Woman 1984 gets like a 4 out of 10 at best rating, in my opinion. And that said, I'm a big movie person, and so even if a movie's bad, I'm still willing to watch it. So, just to you guys, I mean, Wonder Woman 1984 is maybe still worth watching if you're the kind of person like me, but if you're not into basically all the things that make a movie bad, bad acting, kind of annoying plot, tons of plot holes, like technical, physical technical issues, like non-believable storyline, like confusing villain interaction, and then like the main character not really having to make like any decision that's like insanely difficult. Um, if you really don't like all those things, then just don't watch Wonder Woman 1984, or watch it to get annoyed. I don't know. Anyway, guys, that's it for this one. And of course, stay tuned. We'll read more of the Gulag Archipelago. Catch you guys in the next one.